Hey guys, welcome to another video here on the AviationPro channel. In this video we're going to talk about taxiing on the VATSIM network. Now you have your climb, your descent and your approach, these are all very exciting phases of flight, but sometimes the taxiing can be even worse. And in this video I want to cover some tips and show you how to deal with taxiing when you're flying your VATSIM flight. Because depending on the airport, taxiing can be quite nerve-wracking, and especially when there's a lot of traffic, you kind of need to be patient and get a good map overview for yourself in order to find your way around the airport and not be in get in trouble with other traffic. So in this video we're going to discuss some things you need to consider when you're going to find your way around an airport while flying on VATSIM, and we'll also put taxiing into practice with some phraseology to take a look at the best way to tackle a complex airport and taxiing for departure or taxiing after you've landed. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at some things that you can do beforehand when you're going to fly your VATSIM flight. Now first of all, it's very important to have a few items at the ready when you're flying. Now obviously you need charts. Now I've already covered that many times, where to find charts, and you really need to have the charts in order to get a good map overview for yourself in order to find your way around the airport. So if you're completely new to an airport, and especially if that airport is complex, before you make the flight, just study the taxi chart. Maybe take flight radar 24 next to it and kind of check how things are working out and what taxiways are being used by real world traffic. And just take a look at the chart and kind of try to remember the taxiway names and the structure and the directions of the different taxiways, and that way you can kind of create your own map overview so that when you arrive at the airport, taxiing will go more smoothly. And the next thing that you need for taxiing is a pen and paper. I can't stress it enough. Some taxi instructions can be very long, so it's very important that you have a pen and paper next to you so you can simply write down the taxi instruction, because otherwise you're going to be looking at the chart and the map and you're trying to follow the taxi instruction, but then at the point where you have to read back, you kind of forgot all the taxiway names. So the taxiway names, are all short letters, Mike, Alpha, Sierra, Tango. You can just write those letters down. It's not very hard, but make sure you have that pen and paper next to you when you're taxiing. And last but not least, make sure that you have up-to-date scenery. Now, of course, this kind of depends on what scenery is available. Some airports, the larger airports usually have good scenery available, but taxiways change over time. And when you have charts, the air traffic controllers are going to use the information on the charts as their, latest information usually. So if your airport layout is very dated, it doesn't make sense anymore in relation to the chart. So make sure that your scenery is updated so that when you are taxiing around the airport or even landing or taking off from a runway, it's the actual runway that you can see on the chart, and the layout of the chart matches the actual layout of the airport in your scenery. And if it's a freeware scenery, that's fine. On FSIM you can find very simple FCAT files that simply provide the general layout of the airport. But then at least, even though it doesn't look very pretty, at least you have the layout correct. So make sure that you keep that in mind. So with these preparation items at the ready, we're able to go into the aircraft and practice taxiing together with some ATC phraseology. But first of all, I want to give some slight tips to help make your taxiing experience a little bit smoother. Now first of all, it's very important to plan ahead. Now for the departure, this is pretty easy. You're just parking at the gate, what the active runway is, you've received the clearance, so you kind of can figure out already the taxi route by yourself. In this way, you don't have to stress too much about the ATC instruction, because you simply already prepare together with your knowledge about the layout of the airport. You can already kind of prepare the taxi route for yourself. So make sure you kind of write down the taxi route for yourself already, so you kind of remember the taxiway names, and it will make it a lot easier for you once you get the actual taxi instruction. Now of course in some cases you might get a totally different instruction, or maybe you get a totally different runway, and that's why the pen and paper are so important, so that you can just simply write down the taxiway names and then look at the chart after the instruction to see where you have to go. And for the arrival, it's kind of similar, although it can be a little bit difficult. It depends a bit where you're going to be parking, of course. You know your landing runway quite beforehand, before you do the approach briefing, but the gate and the terminal is not always known. Now you can look at airport websites, maybe look up your flight number if you're using a real world flight number, or maybe look up the airline and kind of see which terminal it's usually being parked, and in that way you can plan ahead the taxi route for your arrival. The next thing to do, and this is all really to reduce stress levels during taxiing, because again, taxiing can be quite a nerve-wracking part of the flight, and that is to just take it slowly, guys. You don't have to taxi fast. In a minute, we're going to take a look at kind of the general speeds that you want to adhere to. But there's really no reason to taxi fast. Just take it easy, especially in turns. Make sure you know where you're going first before just going away with 30 knots and trying to find your runway. It just doesn't work. So just take it easy. Of course, when you're in long stretches and you know your route, you can speed up. But before that, just take it easy, especially when you're vacating the runway, for example. You can just take it easy and at least keep some momentum. Don't come to a full stop. Keep some momentum to keep the aircraft going and get the aircraft going later on. But in general, just keep your speed low so you don't freak out as much and you have time to look where you actually are in the airport layout. The last thing I want to say before we actually head into the cockpit is take each other into account. Again, on VATSIM there are different levels of experience. So if you see just an aircraft taxiing by and just not entirely following the instruction from the ground controller, don't freak out yourself. Give that pilot room, and then you can just continue taxi. Just take it easy. Again, that's the main principle. It only makes matters worse if you stress out and get angry at that pilot. So just take into account the different levels of experiences and just make sure that you taxi safely, and that's the best thing that you can do. So without further ado, let's head into the cockpit and take a look at taxiing on the VATSIM network.
Okay guys, so welcome into the Boeing 777 cockpit. We're parked here at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, and I'm going to use this airport as an example. First of all, we're going to take a look at the typical departure taxi instructions that you may get and how that kind of works, and then we're going to take a look at an arrival. Now, taxiing, you already want to make that part of your departure briefing. So before the pushback, you're already going to start thinking about the taxiing. So in this case, you just look up where you're parked and what the runway is where you're going to be taking off from, and of course you will get that runway once you get your clearance. So in this case, we're parked at Echo 8, and we'll just pretend that runway 36 left at Amsterdam is active currently. So you can kind of already anticipate what's going to happen. Now, first of all, you need to push back. You need to know which direction am I going to be pushing back in. Now, not all airport maps may include this, but basically you want to just take the most logical direction for pushing back based on where you need to taxi to. Now, in this case, the airport chart does state something. We're parked at Echo 8, and as you can see, there's a right arrow, and if you look here down here in this legend, you can see what this means. So a right arrow means a right turn as seen from the pushback truck. So our nose is basically going to go to the right and our tail is going to go to the left. Alright, and then you just overview the airport map, discuss with yourself or maybe with your autopilot if you're flying multi-crew, how are you going to taxi. So in this case, well, as you can see, there are arrows on this map that indicate specified taxi instructions for this airport. So we'll probably taxi via Alpha 13 and then via Bravo. We probably won't taxi via Alpha because, as you can see, that arrow is in the different direction. So Bravo, and then we have to pick another chart. Let's see, right here we have the other chart, and then probably Charlie or Delta, Whiskey 5, and then Victor to runway 36 left, as you can see. So kind of try to mention these taxiway names for yourself, so when the controller gives you the instruction, they don't sound as unfamiliar to you as when you would not have prepared this taxi routing. Okay, so when you've completed the pushback, it's time to ask for the taxi clearance. Now, the taxi clearance, depending on the airport, can be very complex, but don't worry, again, have that pen and paper next to you so you can write down the taxiway instructions. And kind of depending on the airport as well, they may give you very simple instruction and expect you to follow standard routings as indicated by the the arrows here on the chart, or they will give you more detailed instruction. Let's first take a look at how to ask that clearance, and then first give an easy example and then a more difficult example. And KLM 641 request taxi. KLM 641 taxi to holding point Victor 4 runway 36 left at Whiskey 5 cross runway 36 center. Taxi to holding point Victor 4 runway 36 left at Whiskey 5 cross runway 36 center, KLM 641. Now, as you can see, a pretty easy taxi instruction, not very complicated, not a lot of different taxiway names. So in this case, the controller simply expects you to, know the default taxi routing. So in this case, because we push back in this direction, we have to taxi via Alpha 13, Bravo, and then if we take a look at the other chart, we have to continue taxi via Charlie. That's the main direction of taxiway Charlie, and then Whiskey 5 cross runway 36 center, and then standard routing via Victor to Victor 4, as also indicated by these arrows in this little side box. So as you can see, a simple taxi instruction, but it can also be a little bit more complicated. KLM 641, taxi to holding point Victor 4, runway 36 left, via Alpha, enter Bravo via Alpha 16, then continue via Delta and hold short Whiskey 5, runway 36 enter. Taxi to holding point Victor 4, runway 36 left, via Alpha, enter Bravo via Alpha 16, continue via Delta and hold short Whiskey 5, runway 36 enter, KLM 641. So as you can see, a more detailed instruction, and that's the route I'm going to follow. It may not be something that would happen at Amsterdam, but taxi instructions can be as complex as this. So keep that in mind and just write it down and then look at the chart. Okay, so based on this, where do I need to go? So you can basically take a look. Okay, he wants me to taxi via Alpha 13. I apparently have to taxi then via Alpha and then enter Bravo via Alpha 16. It could be, for example, there's an aircraft blocking taxiway Bravo, or maybe there's some maintenance on this taxiway. You never know. So keep that in mind that the controller may deviate from standard taxi routings. Okay, so continue via Bravo, then we got to go to the next chart. Bravo, we taxi via Delta and then hold short at Whiskey 5. Now, for runways, if you're taxiing across runways, it's very important to remember whether that runway is active or not and what the controller instructs you. Never just cross a runway without any clearance. If the controller tells you to cross runway 36 center at Whiskey 5 in this case, you can already consider that a clearance, but when the controller tells you to hold short at a particular holding point before a runway, it's likely that you still need clearance for crossing that runway, and in some cases you will be transferred to the tower controller in order to cross that runway. So keep that in mind. Never just cross a runway. Make sure that you have that clearance, and if in doubt, just ask about whether you're clear to cross the runway. Okay, so in this case we're going to follow the taxi instruction of the last transmission, and we're going to hold short at Whiskey 5 and then see what's going on. Okay, so when you have received the taxi instruction, it's time to taxi. Now, always remember what kind of aircraft you're actually flying or taxiing in this case. In this case, we're taxiing the Boeing 777-300ER, and this is a very long aircraft, so it's a bit more sluggish. We have to be careful in the turns, and depending on how heavy you are, you need a little bit more thrust to get moving. So you can see we need quite a little bit of thrust, but again, take it easy. That's very important when you're taxiing around an airport, and especially when you need to make tight turns. Take it easy. So as you can see, we're now already accelerating to 7 knots ground speed. You want to maintain and keep a look on the ground speed to see what's going on. But just take it easy. Make sure that you know what you're doing. So make sure that you have the chart next to you. If you know that the turn is coming up very shortly, don't rush for that turn and make some weird maneuver in order to make that turn. Just take it easy again. You want to make sharp 90-degree turns with about 10 knots. Or about 12 knots, less sharp turns, and basically when you're taxiing straight, you really want to keep your speed at around 20 knots, and absolutely don't go over 30. So keep those kind of figures in mind. And we're coming up now on our first turn. As you can see, we're now at 11 knots, so we're going to reduce the thrust a little bit. Try to brake as less as possible, and by the way, make sure that you have set up your home cockpit in such a way so that you can make nice and smooth turns and that you can brake properly. So in this case, I'm using this joystick right here as a steering tiller, so I'm not using my feet, I'm only using my feet to brake with the rudder pedals. So you can also set a button for that, of course, but with rudder pedals it's a bit more easy. Okay, now again, this is a long aircraft, so I'm going to overshoot a little bit. Again, we're taxiing via Alpha as per the instruction, and by overshooting a little bit I make sure that I don't end up in the grass with my main gear, right? So nice and easy. There we go, 10 knots, keeping nice 10 knots, and I'm just gonna keep this speed for a little while. Nicely finish the turn like this, and make sure you taxi nicely on the center line of the taxiway. Now again, air traffic control has instructed us to enter Bravo via Alpha 16. Now if you want to read the taxi signs properly, you have to take it easy and just take it step by step. So for example, you can take a look here. Alright, there's a sign coming up, and it looks like it reads Alpha 14 indeed. So we're not going to go right here, and the next turn probably is an Alpha 15, and the right turn that we kind of see in front of us is then probably Alpha 16. Alright, so just by taking those taxiways step by step, you can make your way around the airport and make sure that you take the correct turn. So indeed Alpha 15, and then this one must be Alpha 16. So right here we're going to enter taxiway Bravo as per the instruction. Okay, so again, just overshoot a little bit with this long body of the Boeing 777-300ER. There we go, nice and easy. Again, I'm keeping a low speed, and we now can continue taxi onto taxiway Bravo. For the straight portions, you can of course increase your speed a little bit. If you want to taxi as efficiently as possible, as you know they would do in the real world, make sure that you don't give thrust like this all the time. You know, make sure you kind of find a static thrust setting. You know, keep your hands on that thrust, on those thrust levers, and find a steady thrust setting that will keep you at a particular speed, especially during straight portions. All right. So in this case, I'm just going to increase a little bit. Ground speed is now 40 knots. Well, that's okay for now. It might be slightly accelerating, but again, we're coming up on the next 90-degree turn. So if you want to, you know, be as efficient as possible, we might need to reduce the throttle a little bit before that turn and put it to idle in order to let the aircraft's weight, you know, brake for that turn. So we don't have to use the brakes and save some wear and tear on the brakes themselves. So coming up on 90 knots, so I'm just going to reduce the thrust a little bit, kind of find a setting that will keep me on 90 knots. Well, this is looking good so far. And keep on the lookout on the traffic. Of course, when you're flying on VATSIM, there's going to be a lot more aircraft than right now in this offline situation. So keep an eye out on the traffic, and keep in mind that air traffic controller might give you certain instructions.
KLM 641, give way to the KLM Boeing 737 coming from the left on Delta.
Give way to the KLM Boeing 737 at Delta KLM 641. Alright, now we need to give way, so I'm just gonna put the throttles back to idle, let the aircraft brake itself. And apparently there's a KLM Boeing 737, let's say, coming from the left. So let's say it's taxiing here and it's coming across. And those are kind of the instructions that you may get once you're you know, taxiing around on the VATSIM network. So keep that in mind. And that's another reason to keep your speed nice and slow, so that when you have to give way or when there's something happening, you're able to brake in time without hurting the virtual passengers, right? So I'm slightly braking, making sure that KLM 737 passes by nicely. So let's say it has now taxied by, and now we can continue our taxi. Okay, so I'm in 9 knots. There's really no need to increase thrust crazily right now. We'll just kind of keep this thrust setting. And as per the instruction, we'll now taxi via Delta, just a second on the right, so just follow this taxiway. Again, a bit of an alternative routing, but it's something that may happen, you never know, depending on the any taxiway closures that may be active. Now, let's say runway 36 center is actually active, so in some cases the ground controller at some airports and at some runways might transfer you to the tower controller for the crossing, because the tower controller is of course in charge of the runways and who's landing there, who's crossing the runways. So therefore you may need to contact that controller for the crossing, and then you go back to the ground controller if you're still, you know, quite a long way to go on the ground. So in this case the ground controller is going to transfer us.
And KLM 641, contact tower on 119.225 for the cross.
Tower 119.225, KLM 641. Okay, so we're now at Whiskey 5. I'm just going to brake the aircraft nice and slowly. There we go. And I'm going to contact the tower controller 119.225 for the crossing. En Schiphol Tower, goedemorgen, KLM 641, holding short, Whiskey 5.
KLM 641, goedemorgen, at Whiskey 5, cross runway 36 center.
At Whiskey 5, cross runway 36 center, KLM 641. Okay, we now got a clearance to cross the runway, so we can continue the taxi. If you're crossing an active runway, you might want to turn on the strobe lights on your aircraft so that other aircraft know that you're taxiing along a runway. Alright, so whenever you're taxiing across the runway, make sure you turn on those strobe lights temporarily. Alright, so make sure that the left is clear, make sure there's no traffic on the runway. Even though the tower controller has given you a clearance, you always want to check visually where there's no traffic suddenly appearing, because then you can still take action. So, there we go. Nice, we've crossed the runway. Now again, depending on the distance that you still need to go to the runway for your takeoff, or maybe your parking stand if you're landing, you may need to stay with the tower controller, or the tower controller will transfer you back to ground.
And KLM 641, monitor ground 121.7.
Monitor ground 121.7, KLM 641. Okay, so in this case the controllers told us to monitor ground on 121.7, and that basically means that you should not contact the ground controller and say, hey, KLM 641 taxiing on Victor Mike. No, you just monitor the frequency, and the ground controller just knows that you're on their frequency and can just stay there. And if the ground controller needs anything from you, they will just tell you and give you the instruction. So you only have to listen out on the frequency in this case. So 121.7, there we go. Just wrong frequency, 121.7, there we go. And we just monitor the frequency and listen what's going on and wait for any further instructions. So as you can see thus far, taxiing can be quite stressful, especially when there's a lot of traffic and when there's a lot of ATC chatter in the background. But if you prepare well, if you know your taxi routing kind of in advance, and if you take it easy, it's more easy to deal with. And of course, a famous saying in aviation is to aviate, navigate, communicate. With taxiing, it's kind of the other way around, I think. Like, first you communicate what the taxi routing is, then you navigate and check where you need to go, and then you aviate or taxi in order to take the aircraft safely across the taxiways. Okay, so always plan ahead and just take it easy, and that will allow you to, make your taxi experience smoother. Okay, as you can see, we're now approaching the runway, and there might be a queue of traffic right here. Always make sure that you maintain adequate separation between the aircraft, between you and the aircraft in front of you, so you don't, taxi all the way with the window into the APU of the other airplane. That's of course not something that should happen. So make sure you keep adequate distance. Kind of make a sound judgment regarding that, and stay away nicely from the other airplane in front of you. And we're going to taxi to the hold short line as instructed to Victor 4, and probably will receive now the instruction from the ground controller.
And KLM 641 at Victor 4, hold short, contact tower on 119.225, bye-bye.
At Victor 4, hold short and contact tower on 119.225, KLM 641. So as you can see, the ground controller now gave us an hold short instruction, and always make sure that you follow that hold short instruction and actually stop before the beginning of the runway, and then you can contact the tower for your takeoff clearance basically. Now luckily the taxi for departure is something that is more easy because you can plan it ahead, and it's a pretty slow procedure. But on landing it's a little bit different because you're arriving and you need to continue taxi, you need to vacate the runway, and that's what we're gonna take a look at right now. So we're just gonna land the airplane at runway 06 here at Amsterdam and then see what we can do. First of all, before we go there, as with the departure, make sure you prepare in advance, know where you're landing, kind of plan ahead where you want to vacate the runway and where you approximately need to taxi. And you can look up the gates for your airline at particular terminals in the real world, or maybe if you're using the real world call sign again, make sure that you look up the gate of the actual flight, either by looking at flight radar or maybe looking at the airport website. And that way you already kind of know where you may be getting a taxi instruction to. Of course this depends on the ground controller, but at some airports, if you're flying in a non-national airline and you're basically the only Dutch airline, for example, to arrive at that airport, usually that airline has a specific terminal for your airline. So keep that in mind, and that will allow you to find your way easier around the airport. So let's assume which stand we're going to go to. Let's just pretend we're going to Echo 8 again, the gate where we left off. Basically I could have looked up that gate on the actual Schiphol website, for example, or I would have looked up the real world flight and determined that the real world flight that day actually parked here. And basically you can kind of see yourself, okay, so based on that, what is the best way to vacate, right? Do I have to brake very hard and vacate very early on a runway, or can I kind of let the aircraft roll and vacate at Shara 4, for example? So in this case, let's aim for Shara 4. Based on that, you can set your auto brake setting, and basically just follow the taxiway, and if you don't know the route, take it easy. Keep a little bit of momentum to keep the aircraft moving. Never stop just at Shara 4, for example, because there's other traffic landing behind you. So make sure you keep a little bit of momentum. You can always turn around if it's necessary, at a particular taxiway if you taxied in the wrong direction. But in this case, since we already anticipated we're going to park somewhere right here at least, we know that, okay, I could just vacate via Sheriff 4 and taxi via taxiway Bravo, and then make my way through and then wait for instructions from the ground controller. Okay, now before landing, make sure that you have the ground frequency tuned. In this case, I've tuned 1 to 1.8 in the standby box. So once you vacate the runway, you can easily transfer to the ground frequency without having to dial it in. Normally, I would use an app at the bottom of my throttle quadrant right here, but in this case, I'll just show you it this way. And keep in mind that at some airports an auto handoff procedure is in use, so that after landing you simply have to contact the ground controller yourself. And at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport this is indeed the case, but at some airports the tower controller may just give you the ground frequency when you vacated the runway. So keep in mind that you look up on the charts and try and find out whether an auto handoff procedure is in practice. And if you can't find it, just ask the tower controller upon landing. It never hurts to ask again, so keep that in mind. Okay, so I've now landed the airplane. It's going to brake using the auto brake function, and now already look down on the runway and try and see, okay, which exit can I make? Well, I'm not going to make this exit, but it looks like I'm going to make the next exit. So I'm going to switch over to manual braking by slightly tapping the brakes on my rudder pedals, and that will disengage the auto brake, and now I can kind of aim by braking myself for that exit. And always make sure that you keep it a little bit speed up. Don't come to a full stop on a runway. Let the aircraft roll. And that's why rudder pedals are so nice to have. We can easily control the speed of the airplane by aiming for this exit. As you can see, maybe Sheriff 4 indeed is the exit that we're going to make. And we'll just vacate the runway right here. Alright, now, as you can see, nice and easy. Make sure you take care of all your lights, switch off the landing lights, turn on the taxi lights, and you can turn off the strobe lights as well once you've vacated the runway. Now, again, take it easy here. Make sure you taxi past the old short line, and also keep an eye out for traffic. If there's traffic from the left, of course, make sure that you actually stop here. If there's no traffic, you can slightly keep up the momentum, keep going, and then we'll contact the ground controller on 1 to 1.8. And then you would say something like this. Simple ground, goedemorgen, KLM 641, vacated runway 06, Sheriff 4.
KLM 641, goedemorgen, taxi to stand Echo 8.
Taxi to stand Echo 8, KLM 641. Now again, a very simple instruction. In this case, we're just going to follow the standard taxi procedure. Again, just make sure you navigate your way around the airport. So I'm just going to taxi onto this taxiway for now. I know already that I have the taxi via taxiway Bravo, but because this one is going anti-clockwise, so to speak, if you look on the map. And once I'm here, I'll take a look at the chart and see where I exactly need to go. So in this case, we're taxiing via taxiway Bravo again, and then we're going to turn left at Alpha 10 in order to taxi to Echo 8. Again, just if there's arrows on the taxiway chart, make sure you actually make use of them, so you need where to go. You know where to go, and if not, just try to pick the most logical routing, or if ATC gives you any particular routing, make sure you of course follow that. The reason why you really want to overshoot, because if you're just going to follow the line based on what you see here in the cockpit, it's not going to end up well. Maybe I'm a bit exaggerating here, but let's pause here for a minute and take a look outside. Well, as you can see, that turn is indeed pretty tight. If you make a turn like this, you really are in a chance of hitting the grass or breaking the taxiway lights at the airport. And of course, you don't want to do that. So make sure you make nice and wide turns with long aircraft. For 737, it's not really necessary, for example. But the longer the aircraft, the more you want to overshoot in turns in order to avoid yourself ending up in the grass.
So guys, I hope this video has helped you to improve your taxi experience a little bit, especially at complex airports, and in general to reduce your stress levels when taxiing around at airports on VATSIM. And don't worry, I get stressed out myself too sometimes, but if you just take it easy and first make sure you get your bearings and know where you are and know where you need to go, in that way you can make it easier for yourself and, you know, safer for the virtual skies and environment. So thanks for watching this video here on the Aviation Pro channel. Make sure to check out some of my other videos like a go around tutorial or how to fly a holding pattern, and make sure to check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/aviationpro. If you'd like to support the channel, that would be very much appreciated. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.